We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to Conspiracy Corner Podcast, the greatest show on earth. Well, this is technically pre-recorded, so this will be episode 101 in Dalmatians. Corella Deville. How are you all doing today? I hope you all are doing well. I'm doing swell. This is Abe Williams, your host. As far as updates, just been working, suffering from insomnia. That's not too cool. I slept 2 hours today, and I have to work again, but I'm off tomorrow, so that's cool. Yeah, fun. Just been working. I joined a union, that's something new. I've never joined a union before. Yeah, bringing home the bacon, and the love I'm a-making. That's about it, dude. Today we're going to be covering Jack the Ripper, the second murder of Jack the Ripper. But we're going to get into some local news first. All right. This is Abe Williams, your reporter for local news. No, I'm not going to be silly. I'm not going to be funny, because this is somebody that I actually know that lives here locally. Many of my listeners know, excusez-moi, madame, that I used to bartend for about 8 years for Beaumont Inn. And we had this dude blow into town, like a tumbleweed. Out of state, around here they call them transplants. Just like me. I'm from Florida, This dude honestly has always been nothing but good to me, man. Always a good guy to me. He came in, he used to serve in the military, and he was in combat, so I think he's seen a thing or two. He's seen some fucking shit, you know what I mean? So I think he probably has a touch of PTSD. When I used to bartend, he used to sit at the bar, and he had a service animal, a black lab named Francis. And, the dude had issues, I don't know anyone behind closed doors. No one knows anyone behind closed doors, honestly. So I think it's funny, when people are like, oh, I know this person. Do you? do you actually know this person? Do you truly know this person? Because somebody can act like something straight to your face and then be a completely different character behind closed doors, you know? Yes, Kitty, I hear you. there's Horace, the co-host. But I don't know. This story is silly. It is kind of out there. But I kind of felt bad for him because I personally know this dude and I know he's genuinely a good guy. And people are going to be like, well, why are you reporting on this? Because I report the news, bro. I used to be a journalist. I used to write for the newspaper, you know, the Gecko. And then I wrote for Garrett County newspaper for a little bit. I digress. But people know my past. I haven't hid it, you know. I have another podcast besides this one. It's called Blue Pill Podcast, and it's just about different life stories, honestly. It's about different stuff that I experienced in my 30 years of living, you know. Well, technically 29. But I feel like, so I've been, arrested 3 times. So if anyone wants to be like, oh, Abe's being mean, he's laughing about something. Yeah, I laugh to keep from crying or getting mad. I still have this awesome bone within my elbow. It's called a funny bone. Mine hasn't been removed yet. I don't know about you guys, if you guys' funny bone has been removed. I have like a sense of humor where I like dark humor, like Hunter S. Thompson style, Monty Python, shit like that, dude. I like to laugh. For some reason in 2021, people, I don't know, I guess they just want to brood and get down in the comments section and just harp on you, But the story that I'm about to read you, the article that I'm about to read you, it kind of reminds me of like, there was times that I took vigilante justice into my own hands. Not as crazy as this article. I'm not going to sit here and incriminate myself because I'm not Batman. I'd rather be the Joker. But there is times that I thought that I was doing something good. Do you ever get that, like, to where like you're like, oh man, I need to do this, and it's nothing too bad, but it's something shady. Like you feel like you're doing something shady to get over on, like, in your mind, you think it's like a bad guy, a villain, an adversary, a Hasatan, you feel like you're getting over on them, like, like they're just a genuinely shitty person in your mind. And turns out that they're actually completely innocent, that it's all in your head. I don't know. And I'm not saying doing something horrible. It could just be something like, oops, I accidentally tripped you, and you landed in dog poop. Like, It turns out, like, I've even thought this shit, like, with, being a male, I've been like, man, fuck this dude. He's hitting on my wife, And then come to find out, the dude's really not. That's just his personality, and it's all in my head. It's just paranoia. But this story kind of reminds me of that. I don't know. I digress. I'll get on to reading the article. Handy Andy Minor is arrested. It's originally written by Robert Moore, Herald staff of the Herald Leader, or Harrodsburg Herald. I digress. Sorry. Pardon. One of Harrodsburg's biggest proponents of law and order has run afoul of the law. Andy J. Minor, 48, a resident of Broadway Street, better known as Handy Andy, was arrested this weekend, and the charges read, he intentionally dropped screws under the tires of 2 vehicles at 4 a.m. on Friday, May 14th. Minor was installed Minor, who has installed surveillance cameras on his property and has distributed pictures of people he claimed were drug dealers online and before the Harrodsburg City Commission was identified. In part to surveillance footage obtained from nearby utility poles, according to the complaint warrant. Using that footage, officers from the Harrodsburg Police Department were able to track Minor's blue Dodge Durango driving through town before parking on West Office Street. The officers were able to confirm that the vehicle was Minor's because stickers on the vehicle in the footage matched stickers on Minor's Dodge Durango. According to the warrant, Minor got out of his vehicle, walked towards Clark Street, and according to the complaint, did something to the tires of two vehicles before leaving. The victim, who also claims to have video footage of Minor placing screws under the vehicles, told police she'd pay $117 to fix a tire. Later that day, Patrolman Blake Darland questioned Minor about his whereabouts at that time. He was unable to tell us where he was. Well, that right there, that's your first screw up, bro. You always got to have an alibi. Bro. Minor invited Darland to look at his surveillance footage to see if his vehicle was at his house at the time of the incident. According to the complaint, when they looked at the footage, his vehicle was not located at his residence at the time that the incident had occurred. Minor said he often drove around at night due to a sleep disorder. I know that feeling, bro. I got insomnia right now, bro. Let's see. Sorry. But was unable to say where he was at the time of the incident, according to the complaint. Minor continues to deny he had anything to do with the incident. It's not me, Minor said Tuesday. I assure you, with 100% confidence, that it wasn't me. Minor claims he noticed his vehicle and had been moved lately, but said he didn't think anything of it. He said he believes someone else drove his Dodge Durango that night. Oh my God, sorry. Whoever came out of the vehicle is not me, Minor insisted, saying he had been the victim of a conspiracy. The drug dealers don't like me, Minor said. He named a person whom he believes to be a real culprit and showed this reporter footage of a confrontation Minor had with this person, but not of the incident early Friday morning. This person is not the victim named in the complaint. Minor owns at least 3 properties in Harrodsburg, Kentucky, under his own name and under a corporate name. According to records at the Mercer County PVA office, since moving on to Broadway, the oldest street in Kentucky, he has been a lightning rod for controversy. In June 2019, one of Minor's neighbors, Lucille Hayden, came before the Harrodsburg City Commission to complain about Minor trespassing on other people's property and posting pictures on Facebook. Y'all, Facebook is nothing but drama, dude. Stay away from it. It's nothing but drama. Do me a favor. Cancel your Facebook profile. The continuing complaints, not just from Minor's neighbors, but from law enforcement and elected officials, led the Harrodsburg City Commission to not give their blessings to a neighborhood watch program Minor had organized later that year. At the meeting, Commissioner Scott Mosley, I know that dude, took Minor to task for posting pictures of so-called drug dealers without offering any proof. I assure you, with 100% confidence, they are actual drug transactions, Minor said at the time. It was Sid Dunn's car delivering wings. Yeah, that's a local dude who cooks barbecue. So Minor had been watching from his house and seeing this car, stop at the same house over and over and over again. Turns out it was just a barbecue, like a local barbecue joint. He was delivering hot wings. Sorry. I think that's hilarious. Oh. said Mosley, referring to Bergen City Councilman Syndicate Sid Dunn, an employee of Dunn's Barbecue. You took a picture of his car and put it all over Facebook. Miner says he wants what's best for Broadway and Harrodsburg, and has organized and participated in several local beautification and cleanup efforts. He recently discovered a one-room cabin hidden inside a house he purchased on West Broadway, which he claims dates back to the earliest days of the city. On Sunday, May 16th, Miner was arrested and charged with 2 counts of third-degree criminal mischief and another count of attempted third-degree mischief. Patrolman Blake Darlin made the arrest. Miner was released on his own reconnaissance. On Tuesday, Miner insisted the figure identified by police as him was not him. Miner said he is retaining legal counsel and buying a new vehicle. The truth will come out, Miner said. Oh, I love living in a small town in Kentucky. Dude, people are so fucking bored around here. That this is the ridiculousness that happens in general. I try not to be like TMZ style, but I think that I just laugh because this shit's crazy and ridiculous, just in general. I do know the Sid Dunn dude. I'm not like trash talking or nothing, but he's always actually kind of acted smug with me. Not smug, but I used to work at like a gas station locally, and he's the type of guy that like he can never put his fucking phone down. Like, you're just like, hey, how are you? And he's just like, he'll walk up with his phone like glued to his ear and be like, yeah, give me 3 slices of pizza. And it's like, you just stare at him and he's like, what? I said, how are you? Oh, I'm good. Give me 3 slices of pizza. Like that type of guy. But, yeah, I mean, you can't be like, I don't know. Delete your Facebook. I thought it was a silly story. I thought it was crazy. I try to report on local news just because I do pass out flyers, and I actually do have local listeners. I'm trying to get into ham radio. I thought that'd be kind of cool to like broadcast on like AM or something like that. But that's the local news for today. Barely a week was to pass before the ghastly autograph would be signed again. In that time, the police, finding no apparent motive for the murder of Polly Nichols, nor for 2 previous prostitute murders that year, those of Emma Smith, the 3rd of April, and Martha Tabram, August 7th, concluded that the motive was an intense hatred of prostitutes. Men who had aired such thoughts publicly were sought, and a number of suspects were questioned. Soon the newspapers were proclaiming the arrest of a Whitechapel bootmaker, John Pizer, who was known to beat up whores when he was drunk. However, the knives found at his lodgings were easily explained away by his trade. On top of this, his alibi was strong, so he was released. His was the nickname Leather Apron. That was to figure so prominently in police inquiries. Although it is now generally accepted that Nichols was the first actual Ripper victim, it is not difficult to appreciate the concern that had been mounting for some time previously in the East End. There had been 3 murders in 5 months. Admittedly, Emma Smith claimed she had been attacked by 4 men, but the public had heard about the dreadful internal injuries that had been afflicted, and these were superseded in the case of Tabram, who was found with no less than 39 puncture wounds in her body. Polly Nichols, they thought, had been killed by the same frenzied hand, but later investigations showed clear dissimilarities between the murders. In the case of Smith, her assailants were believed to be members of the notorious Old Nickel Gang. The Bethnal Green Street, from which they got their name, had been a center of East End crime for more than a century. The gang used methods as varied as terrorizing prostitutes and sending children out to shoplift. Dickens has told it all. Things were particularly bad at the end of the summer of 1888. The people of the East End were close to panic. Local traders were losing business as people from neighboring districts shunned Whitechapel, and the area was beginning to get even more unsavory reputation than hitherto. A sickening pattern was emerging. A sadistic maniac was at large, and the police were powerless. Hanbury Street runs eastward from London's major meat market, Spitalfields to Whitechapel, passing through an area that was in the last century one of the most feared districts in the East End. It was a street of dingy, three-storied houses, with shops on the ground floor and flats above them. On the top floor of number 29 there lived John Davis, an elderly porter from Spitalfields, with his wife. 14 other tenants crammed into their tiny dwelling. At that time the shop beneath was a barber's. Besides the shop, a passage ran through the building with a door at each end. The passage led to an untidy backyard, a patchwork of stones and earth. The beginning of the weekend was a busy time at the meat market in those days before the refrigerator. The Sunday joint would be purchased on Saturday, and Davis was up early enough to perform this task. At 6 o'clock, about to leave for work, he went out into the yard. A meat porter is not generally squeamish about blood. He lives his daily life with the sight and smell of it. But even John Davis was not prepared for the image that smashed into his senses as he swung back the door from the house. Beside the two stone steps down into the yard, between them and the fence of a number 27, was the mangled body of a woman. She lay discarded in the familiar rape position, on her back, knees drawn up and outwards, feet resting on the ground. Her hands were raised with the palms outwards, her left arm across her left breast. Her face was clearly visible. Her dirty black skirt had been pulled above her knees. Her entrails were strewn around her body. Davis ran screaming into the street, where he gasped out the details of his find to two passing workmen. In the marketplace they found a policeman, who remarkably declined to come with them on the grounds that the murder had not taken place on his beat. Back in Hanbury Street, the men's cries of "murder" were heard by Detective Inspector Joseph Chandler, a more peripatetic officer than his subordinate. A crowd had gathered, and the detective had some difficulty forcing his way through the passage. Mercifully, the remains had now been covered with a tarp after arranging for telegrams to be sent to various officers, including Detective Inspector Aberline of Scotland Yard, who had assisted at the Nichols murder inquiry. Chandler set about looking for clues. By the time the divisional surgeon, Dr. George Bagster Phillips, arrived some minutes later, the houses surrounding the yard were crowded with sightseers. Apparently some were even charged a small fee for access to the windows. That's screwed up. Somebody making money. But I mean, kind of makes sense that back then they didn't have television or radio, so I don't know, it was just kind of a spectacle, you know? The murderer had made sure that their ghoulish curiosity would not go unrewarded. Indeed, for some onlookers, the sights were more than they had bargained for. and several flat dwellers, having sold grandstand tickets, later found themselves with unevenable cleaning up task. Man, that's crazy too, because like that still goes on. I was listening to somebody talk about here recently. It was like either somebody I was talking to or listening to the radio or something, but they were talking about that a lot of people think like when they commit suicide and stuff, like they think like the ambulance or the cops will clean it up, and that's the thing. They'll take away the body, but they don't clean up the mess. Like, you know, like if you blow your brains out, your wife or your kids or your family has to literally clean up the guts and the mess and stuff. Um, and I don't know. I don't think a lot of people think about that, but Dr. Bagster Phillips rolled back the tarp to reveal the body, clothed in a long black coat and skirt, over red and white blood-stained stockings. His nimble fingers untied the handkerchief around the neck. But he was unprepared for the result. As he fumbled with the knot, the head rolled sideways, attached to the body by only a thin strip of skin. The doctor took his grim inventory. Above the dead woman's right shoulder were a piece of her abdomen and her small intestine, attached by a cord that ran back to the rest of the intestines inside the body. Closer examination revealed more flaps of skin from the abdomen at the left shoulder, soaked in a pool of blood. The tableau was made more ghastly by the curious placing of objects apparently taken from the victim. At the feet were 2 brass rings and 2 bright new farthings. At the head were 2 pills wrapped in a screw of paper and a piece of the envelope marked with the seal of Sussex Regiment. Phillips turned over the scrap of paper, and besides letters M and SP, he found a post office date stamp reading London 28, August 1888. Final curiosity, and one which, like the other items, led the police to many fruitless inquiries, lay under a water tap which projected from the fence about 3 feet from the body. Screwed up and soaking beneath the tap was a leather apron. Later that afternoon, the doctor attended the mortuary to examine the body more closely, but he was hampered by the fact that it had been washed and stripped, only the handkerchief having been left in place to prevent the head separating from the torso. Timothy Donovan, a lodging house keeper, identified the body as that of Annie Chapman, known locally as Dark Annie. He kept the lodgings at 35 Dorset Street and had been seen in the kitchen there at 2 o'clock that morning. Donovan had turned Annie out when she had been unable to pay for her food and for her bed. Ironically, it may have been that from the piteous coins beside her body, she may in fact have had the few pennies required to give her the safety of the lodgings. Although a long-standing prostitute well known in Stratford area of East London, Annie had seen better times. She had been married to a veterinarian who was an army pensioner. To assist with his pension, Mr. Chapman had latterly worked as a coachman. There had been 2 children, a deformed son in a cripple's home, and a daughter who was in an institution in France. Annie had lived in Windsor until she had left her husband about 4 years before, probably because of her fondness for gin. His allowance of 10 shillings a week to her had ceased on his death in 1886. The dark Annie, with her blue eyes and wavy brown hair, was plump, well-proportioned, and 47 years old. She looked several years older, and with loss of her front teeth, probably in one of her frequent brawls, she presented no attractive sight. Nevertheless, Donovan was quite sure that she frequently entertained men at Dorset Street. The inquest took place on September 10th before Mr. Wynne E. Baxter at the Working Lads Institute in Whitechapel Road, where several days before the hearing on Polly Nichols had found wilful murder against person or persons unknown, quote unquote. The meeting room on the second floor was packed to overflowing and was hot and stuffy. It was hardly surprising that in such an atmosphere, and with the revelation of such harrowing details, a number of spectators, both male and female, passed out. It may have been these distractions that caused the coroner to clear the court for the most horrific parts of Dr. Baxter Phillips' evidence. Next day, the Times described these further details as unfit for publication. With its more restricted leadership, the Lancet had no such qualms. The abdomen had been entirely laid open. The intestines, severed from their mesenteric attachments, had been lifted out of the body and placed on the shoulder of the corpse, whilst from the pelvis, the uterus and its appendages, with the upper portion of the vagina and the posterior 2/3 of the bladder, had been entirely removed. No trace of these parts could be found. In answer to the coroner, Dr. Baxter Phillips said the minimal time an expert would take to perform such a task would be 15 minutes. He considered the surgery skilled. Noting that the womb had been removed, the coroner concluded that both Nichols and Chapman had been murdered for some object to secure some pathological specimen from the abdomen. With these 18 words, a hornet's nest was overturned. The appalling motive was published widely, and the talk of resurrectionist sent a chill throughout Whitechapel, reviving memories of Burke and Hare, Edinburgh body snatchers who had been caught and executed 60 years before. A representative of a medical school told of being approached by a wealthy American who wished to issue specimen organs with a book that he was writing. Scotland Yard was informed, but nothing further was heard. The steady procession of witnesses affirmed Annie's lifestyle. Later, Mrs. Richardson described the polyglot occupants of her house. In the back room lived an old woman, Sarah Cox. Mr. and Mrs. Copsey, cigar makers, lived in the second floor, back. A carman, Mr. Thompson, his wife, and adopted daughter occupied the front room. In the room on the first floor overlooking the yard lived Alfred Walker and his father. The front parlor in this menagerie was used as a cat's meat shop. Yes, they sold cat to people. We talked about that on the last Jack the Ripper episode because I like to do mini-series. So I'll put a card if you're watching from YouTube at the end of this video if you didn't catch the first Jack the Ripper murder. But yeah, we kind of got into that talking about Whitechapel and stuff and how they'd sell cats as food because everybody in that area was poor, you know. Let me find, where was that? Well. All these people had crossed and recrossed the yard at various times throughout the night. The landlady's son admitted that local prostitutes sometimes took clients into the yard behind the house, and that he visited the yard frequently in order to discourage them. He was the leather apron, which he had left out to dry the night before, but it was apparently used by the killer in his post-mortem ablutions. The dead woman had been seen haggling with a man outside number 29 at 5:30, and by 6 a.m. she was dead, and the mutilations would have taken 15 minutes. A number of witnesses gave descriptions of men seen with Annie. So many witnesses, so many men. The score was now 4 unsolved murders in 5 months, and the local traders were getting desperate. The following notice was published. Finding that, in spite of these murders committed in our midst, our police force is inadequate to discover the author or authors of the late atrocities. We, the undersigned, have formed ourselves into a committee and intend offering a substantial reward to anyone, citizen or otherwise, who shall give such information as will be the means of bringing the murderer or murderers to justice. Would money compensate for what was claimed to be the bungling insufficiency that had followed in the wake of each crime? The police certainly were not short of suggestions. Letters from all over the nation began to arrive at Scotland Yard. The amateur sleuths were out in force. But when a member of Parliament, Samuel Montague, offered the immense sum of £500 reward, the stream of letters became a torrent. But that's the second murder of Dark Annie. I hope you all enjoyed. Like I said, I will leave a card at the end of the video if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening to audio only, you can check out our YouTube channel. It's Conspiracy Corner Podcast. We do other videos and stuff, like ghost hunts, cryptozoological hunts, stuff like that. So if you're an audio listener only, go over to YouTube and sub to Conspiracy Corner Podcast. The profile picture is a little white rabbit with a samurai sword. But we put out other stuff, visual content too. And if you're a YouTube follower and you would like to just listen in audio form, I know a lot of people listen to stuff on their phone with headphones, and YouTube drains the battery, so actually some people do prefer listening in audio form. You can find us on Spotify, Breaker, Anchor, Radio Public, and Google Podcasts. But that's all she wrote for today. I hope you all enjoyed, and God bless.
We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.